Well, hello there, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall, and this week we're going to take a look at the nutritional framework that I use when I help my clients change how they're relating to themselves when it comes to what they eat. But first, I want to tell you a little something that NASM has for us. If you're interested in supporting clients to make sustainable changes in their wellness and well being, we've got a little something for you. And regular listeners of this show know on the NASM Podcast Network, Better Than Fine, we're here to support you as coaches, as positive psychology practitioners, as individuals looking to make sustainable, positive change. Well, NASM has a wellness coaching certification that's been built by experts in sleep, stress, coaching, neuroscience, movement, positive psychology. And I was particularly proud to get to be a subject matter expert to contribute to this certification. And to me, one of the most important things about it is it helps you to create a container for supporting sustainable, meaningful, lasting positive change with the clients that you work with. Because certainly anybody who knows anything about behavior change knows that just telling people what to do doesn't work long term. So, to that end, if you're interested in becoming a certified wellness coach through NASM, that certification is currently 50% off on NASM's website. And listeners to this show, this is the only place that you can get this discount is through this code. It's an additional $600 off the certification in addition to the discount that's already on the website. So that code that you're going to want to use at checkout, it's Marshall CWC. So my last name, MARSHALLCWC. So you go to NASM.org, click wellness at the top, use that promo code, $600 off the current price. So hopefully for those of you who are interested in joining us as a wellness coach, that gives you a little extra cushion to get on the bandwagon. Okay, so additive nutrition. Let's get to it. Anybody who has a relationship with yo-yo dieting, orthorexia, any kind of disordered eating pattern, or anyone who's got maybe a less than awesome relationship with the fitness and wellness space as it is, there is a tension that creates between wanting to take care for and love the body that you are in and not wanting to chase that diet culture ideal that we know is not necessarily awesome for our mental and emotional well-being. And then that tension creates a sense of confusion. How do we move forward in a positive way that allows you to actually nourish yourself, but everything everybody's talking about is all getting smaller? Throughout my career in fitness and wellness, I have had countless clients who have struggled with this tension. I personally have struggled with this tension. And if you've listened to this show for a while, you know many of our guests struggle with this. We want to be healthy. We want to take care of ourselves. But you can end up genuinely unsure how to go about it in a way that is good for your mental health while also taking care of your physical body. And we also, most of us, I think, know that the best way, the fastest way, the easiest way to distort someone's thinking is to tell them, don't eat carbs, don't eat sugar, don't eat processed foods, don't eat legumes, don't eat wheat, don't eat too much fat, and on and on. The don't. I want you to think about pink elephants. I'm going to tell you not to think about pink elephants. And I wonder what you're thinking about right now. I bet it's elephants. So in my hopefully humble opinion, a particularly nefarious marketing technique that plays right into this idea of restriction, right? How many times have we heard diets marketed by saying, well, you don't have to restrict to lose weight. You don't have to stop eating your favorite foods on this diet. And it creates this double whammy of promising an answer to this tension of, well, I don't know what to do, but I know I don't want to do that. And promoting diet culture and weight loss. Again, we all know that doesn't work. If you doubt that it doesn't work, I encourage you to go back and listen to the episode from January with Rich Fromme, where we talk about whether or not diets work. We know it doesn't work. We know we want to avoid it, but we're not necessarily getting pushed any other ideas. So what do? Well, in this episode, I'm going to share my current strategy for what I do with my clients on nutrition, how I approach it, why I do it that way. And I'll also be sharing, along with the pillars of why I do it that way, the framework of process that I use with my clients now. So, yeah, its foundation is in the same is yeah, it's the foundation of these ideas is the same as any other strategy that I use with my clients. So I want holistically healthy behavior. So they're not only focused on what happens in the body, but there's an awareness of the mind and the emotional well being that's coming up with my clients. So, what that means is if I suggest something to a client that's for their physical well being, but there is a mental detriment or an emotional reaction that is harmful to them, it's not a healthy habit. So, what we look for is how can we create well being in their mind and their body and their emotions and their life? We all know that most eating programs focus on what not to do, on what we exclude, which studies of disordered eating tell us that is one of the ways that you bring on disordered eating patterns is to focus on restriction. And if you want a deep dive into how that all works, I encourage you to go back and listen to the orthorexia episode in September of 2022. So putting all those foundations, right? If that's pouring the foundation, we want additive positive, we want holistically healthy. We're not going to focus on restriction. That's the foundation for additive nutrition. So additive nutrition is when we set that diet culture mindset around food aside and we focus on what nourishes you, not only your body, but your mindset, your connection to culture, your connection with other people, positive experiences of your genuine, authentic self. What foods align with your individual goals and your beliefs and sound nutrition and health science? That's what we're going to unpack in today's episode. You're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall, and we're looking at additive nutrition. And I want to start with the 4 pillars that make up additive nutrition for me and the way I use it with my clients. So those 4 pillars are learning to listen to your body and yourself, learning evidence-based information, but also using common sense. Progressive behavior change beats quick and dirty every time. And keep the focus on what you're doing right. So let's break each of these down. The first is listen to your body and your aligned self. Our bodies have a ton of information that they are giving us all the time, but many of us, either we aren't taught how to interpret and listen to that information, or we're in lifestyles that encourage us to tune it out, right? Oh, you got to focus on work. You've got to be productive. You got to show up. You got to, rise and grind. And because you're tuning it out or you're not taught how to listen at all, you don't necessarily pick up on these signals. Learning how to listen to your body. So hunger and satiety cues, tension in your muscles and what that information might mean. What are your natural circadian cycles and your digestive rhythms? It's all a language that your body is using to communicate with you. But if no one ever taught you that language, how would you know? And I will give you a concrete personal example that's almost even a little bit embarrassing. So since I was a teenager, I've had an intermittent pain in my rib cage. It comes and goes. And as a teenager, I was taken to the emergency room multiple times and told, oh, that's inflammation in your rib cage. It's called costochondritis. I was told, take some ibuprofen, it'll go away. Sometimes it wouldn't go away for months, but I was always just told, like, yeah, that's costochondritis. Okay, so fast forward. I'm 39 now. Last year, I got this pain really bad. And it came and went for months. It got so intense. My back was hurting. It was worse than it had ever been before. But the difference was in these last few decades, I've been practicing yoga, doing body scan meditation, acupuncture, like all of these things that gave me a better sense of my body and the information it was giving me. And I could tell through a nuanced awareness of my body, there's no way that the pain I was having was costochondritis. So instead, I went looking out for different answers because I had different information. Well, it turns out that as part of my genetic disorder, developing hiatal hernias is very common. And I've got the kind of hiatal hernia that moves. Sometimes I have the hernia, sometimes I don't. Well, that additional level of information and awareness, my body had been giving me information all along. I'd been taught the wrong way to interpret that information when I was like 15. So turns out best course of treatment was for me to just change some structure in my nutrition, because now I can respond to the information accurately because I listened to my body. Well, there's also then carrying that to the aligned self. Listening to your body relies on the idea that there might be expert level information about human beings in general, but you are the expert on you and what's going to work in your life. So of course my doctor was like, "Hey, you should just take this, medication and that will keep you from having pain." Or I was like, I could also just adjust how I'm eating and not fill my stomach with so much volume at one time. And now I have 4 meals instead of 3, but the same amount of calories. There was a way to make that work with my belief system that helped to treat the problem, which is all just to say, we got to learn how to listen to our body and interpret the information and then make good choices that actually work for us. You're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall. We're talking about additive nutrition. So the first pillar was listen to your body and your aligned self. The second pillar, learn evidence-based information, but also use common sense. So nutrition science, like as a discipline, it's pretty young. And good science moves slowly. So one thing about our current social media landscape is that it seems to me like everybody wants to have some hot take on some new study that just came out, but science doesn't move very fast. And I'm guilty of this too. But good science tests and retests and gradually comes to consensus as a body of evidence is built around a set of ideas. So like something that I don't love that I see is one little study will come out done in like mice, and some biohacker will talk about it like it's the next great thing in wellness, and then push a supplement that you could only get like illegally on the dark web imported with cryptocurrency. And that is not an anecdote or a joke. That is literally a thing that like a very famous biohacker who I happen to listen to regularly promotes through their channels. The flip of that is my favorite studies, which are meta-analysis. So that's where you look at all of the available information on a topic. You end up with thousands and thousands of data points that you can reference. And then you look at that available data and figure out like what's true. So a big meta-analysis just came out about exercise and depression. And it essentially like hands down through thousands and thousands and thousands of people with depression, exercise is a very effective way to treat severe clinical depression, right? That meta-analysis is beautiful because it's looking at hundreds of studies and then whittling them down to get good data. But the flip of that is the diet and supplement industries make really big money when they sell fads. And the way that they do that is they say, okay, everything that came before this is wrong. We know what really works. So here, this is what really works. Everybody else doesn't know they're talking about. And all it does is make people more confused. So this is how we got like low fat diets and margarine in the 80s. Then we got no and low carb. Hopefully by now, most people know your body thrives on all 3 macronutrients, but we've got people out there doing the carnivore diet. So maybe not. Maybe people don't know that. So finding reliable information you can trust. Evidence-based information means that there is a scientific basis that we can point to and say reliably, we think this works, but also use your common sense, right? The carnivore diet goes against common sense. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't Google it. It's not good for your heart or your soul. Okay, so axiom number 1, listen to your body and your aligned self, right? Learn to listen to your body. Number 2, learn evidence information, but use your common sense. Axiom number 3, progressive change wins over quick and dirty every time. Decades of marketing pushing the idea that rapid weight loss is available to people. This idea that you should be able to change your body overnight, not only weight, but also health, mindset, mood, money. We have pushed the idea that you can just change yourself. You can reinvent yourself, and that's how that works. Promising quick fixes is the same as making someone afraid that something bad is going to happen to them so that they can sell you supplements, right? Like, take this supplement and then you won't be tired. Take this supplement and then you won't be, predisposed to some negative outcome, just so they can sell you something. You're not a light switch. You're a human being, and you grew up into who you are over decades. Evolving who you are takes time. That's not a bug, it's a feature. And short-term solutions create snapbacks that are painful, just like overstretching a rubber band. Behavior change research is remarkably clear that what we want to do that actually works long-term is to be at the edge of what you currently know you can do and get really consistent, and then let that grow you and continue to push the edge out farther and farther. You don't have to change everything once, and you'll be so much more successful in whatever you want to grow into if you change gradually and consistently instead of quick and dirty. So you're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall, and I'm walking you through the pillars of additive nutrition as I use them with my clients. So number 1 was to learn evidence-based information, but use your common sense. Number 2, listen to your body and your aligned self. Number 3, progressive change over quick and dirty. And number 4, focus most on what you're getting right. And this is the positive psychology practitioner in me. We know that an additive, positive focus is so much more successful in the long term than nitpicking at everything you get wrong. You'll be more consistent. You'll be happier. Your stress is lower. You'll feel more successful, which means that you'll keep going. And then all of those cycles repeat again. Okay? But any coach that listens to this show probably already knows, how many sessions have you had start with a recall from your client of everything that they did wrong over the last week? And especially early in the process, I've got clients that treat coming into their coaching session like going into a confessional if you're Catholic. Forgive me, Coach Dar, I only did my habit 80% of the time this week. And I'm over here like 80%. 80% is 80% better than you did the week before. That is a massive win. But again, we get conditioned by this like rise and grind, all or nothing mentality that indoctrinates people with the belief that if they slip up at all, they have failed. And that's not true. That's quick and dirty thinking. And that goes back to axiom number 3. So when we focus on what's right, we get a different set of outcomes. And yes, the critique that I get pushed back on this is that mitigation matters. And I'm not saying I never have an avoidance conversation, but I believe very strongly that as my clients gain momentum, they gain efficacy, self-awareness, they get confidence, they build well-being. And then they start to feel how crappy they feel when they go against what's in their own best interest. And I can give you a very concrete example of this one too. So a client of mine who I love, we've been taking this additive nutrition approach. They've been nailing it. 3 meals a day, protein at every meal. I'm going to walk you through the sequence in a session, so don't worry about it. But 3 meals a day, protein every meal, veggies every meal, protein-based snacks, rock star. Well, last week, they just got an inkling, they got a wild hair, and they thought, I want some fast food. No shade on fast food. We're taking an additive approach. There's nothing exclusionary. Just follow the structure. Okay, so they get fast food. Horrendous stomach cramping and a little bit of what I like to call digestive pyrotechnics. I'll let you color in the lines on that one. Their body flipped out. Totally flipped out. And referring back to axiom number 1, listen to your body and your aligned self. So the next time we spoke, they were adamant they do not want to eat fast food anymore. And why? They said their body feels absolutely awful and they just don't want to live like that anymore. So because they'd grown a different relationship through the feedback of their relationship with their body, the mitigation part took care of itself. All they needed was to be given the information to interpret that accurately, to have built the relationship with their body, and to have felt what feeling good feels like. And the negative became intolerable. The positive focus worked with the mitigation without me having to say anything about don't eat this, don't eat that, It just was a focus on doing what's right for you in your own body. So now I want to walk you through the exact sequence I work with my clients. And I want to be very clear. This happens with my clients over the course of weeks and months. It's not all at once. We don't do it over a few days. This is a progressive change process where we're also examining what's coming up emotionally, socially, and we're making other changes to their mindfulness practices, their movement, right? Like it's not only nutrition, but that way, like I don't want you to listen to this sequence and try to go do all of it all at once. Okay? So, number 1 in the sequence, are you consistently eating enough? And the emphasis here is on consistency. And this is probably the hardest thing that my clients struggle to wrap their head around. And I have to have enough trust, enough belief that they will take me on faith if they don't think I'm right off the bat. And that's because the world has pushed this idea of eating less and moving more so aggressively that when I say to a client, are you sure you're eating enough? It sounds completely out of place to them. However, what I have found in well over a decade of practice is many people get in a cycle where they will calorie restrict for a few days, whether intentionally or not. And that dampens their metabolic activity, right? Their metabolism is not humming along in the way that we would hope. So then the weekend comes, or a party happens, or a happy hour, or they hit the drive-through, and they enjoy themselves. No shade on that. But because of the few days of calorie restricting and what that's done to metabolism, now you're indulging and enjoying yourself. That is going to fritz up, for lack of a better phrase, your metabolic health. And then also most people have a few times a year that they yo-yo diet. They go on calorie restriction while over exercising. And what you get in the equation of this like cycling of calories week to week, inconsistent exercise, and restrictive dieting with over exercising is metabolic damage progressively year after year after year. So the first thing I advocate for with my clients is that we stabilize their eating habits day to day. So are they eating in a way that adequately nourishes their body? And if you've got this question of like, well, how much is enough? What we do is use a basal metabolic rate calculator, BMR calculator, to estimate their caloric needs. And I'll then have them give me a standard days recall or have them journal for a few days to calculate like, okay, how much are you actually eating? What does your body need? And then illustrate the caloric gap. And then we go from there. So that's number 1. Are you consistently eating enough? Number 2, are you getting enough protein? And I ask my clients first, what do you know about protein? Typically, they could tell me a couple of foods that have protein in it, but not necessarily about why protein matters to their health. So I educate them. Protein is needed to build metabolically active tissues like muscle. It's also a building block for hormones, membranes, other structures in the body. And if you want to be dancing at weddings in your 90s, you're going to need to have enough protein on board to build those structures that can last, right? If you think of your body like a skyscraper, you need good steel in those big beams or that building's not going to stand for a really long time. So I take 2 approaches with this. Some clients, I will have them track their nutrition long enough that we know that they're eating enough and that 20% of those calories come from protein. For some of my clients, tracking is not advisable and, no shade in it. If tracking will be detrimental to their well-being, we use other ways. And typically for those clients, the ways that we use it is to use their palm size to gauge a serving of protein. And then we set an appropriate protein goal for each time that they eat based off of that palm-sized serving of protein. Sometimes I'll give them a protein target without any tracking. It really does, this is where we get that variance of the coach with the client. So you're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall. We're talking about additive nutrition. And right now I'm breaking down what are the exact steps I use with my clients. So number one, we ensure that they're eating enough consistently every day. Number two is, are you getting enough protein to support a healthy metabolism? And most of the time, if a client's working with me, we're in the process of building that hormonal and metabolic health. So they're going to need protein on board if we're going to build well-supported, hormonally sound, metabolically active tissue. And then number three, we're going to look at their veggies. Most people know that eating veggies is important. Most people do not know that there are different classes of vegetables that do different things in the body. And some vegetables are going to have, I don't want to say greater health impact, but a more immediate health impact for somebody who's looking to build wellness. So an example would be, pumpkin, zucchini, summer squash. Those are like gourd-like vegetables. They are great sources of micronutrients and vitamins. Most clients will eat, like zucchini zoodles. I feel like zucchini noodles were a thing for a while. And they're eating root vegetables, right, which is starches. But then they're not getting enough cruciferous vegetables. So those are deep green and sulfur-rich vegetables. So bok choy, kale, cauliflower. Well, why does it matter that you're eating broccoli and spinach over carrots? Well, the deep greens and the cruciferous vegetables are the biggest feeders of healthy gut bacteria. And people are pushing probiotics, but here's a prebiotic food that does all kinds of wonderful things for the gut that like a carrot doesn't necessarily do. So there are lots of other classes of veggies. We're going to have a veggie focused episode coming, but I start my clients with prioritizing whatever vegetables are going to be greatest to their health benefit in whatever way that they're ready to take on, right? Because it's about them and their aligned values and choices. So my favorite one that I recommend to almost every client is to add a green vegetable at breakfast. So one of the ways that like a Darlene coaching client is they're probably doing spinach as a veggie, like a scramble with eggs for breakfast, because it can be a real game changer to satiety in the gut and like overall health throughout the day. So number one, are you eating enough? Number two, enough protein. Number three, tinkering with your veggies. Number four is meal timing. So depending on the client, this might get prioritized first. So if I've got somebody who's skipping breakfast every day, this is probably conversation number one. And quick dive on the breakfast thing. Research is mixed on how helpful breakfast is for different people, different bodies, different situations. But this is where the common sense thing comes in for me. I've been doing this for a while, and I have consistently found with almost every client I have worked with, they are more healthful in their choices throughout the day, more consistently, they have more energy, and they feel better when they start with a savory breakfast. Now, we could debate intermittent fasting all day long. I welcome that debate. If you want to have that debate, let me know. But this is my very clear experience and common sense. Savory breakfast. So then from their first meal, we'll look at how are you eating consistently throughout the day? Are you having cravings and crashes? Do we need a snack in there? Like, what's going on with the consistency of the timing of your meals, because that's going to have a big impact on circadian rhythm and hormone function throughout the day. And then after that, we circle back. We're looking to make iterative improvements. Where can we make tweaks? What else can you learn? What have you learned already? And how has it changed your values, your beliefs, your self-perceptions? Now, astute listeners are going to notice I didn't specifically mention fats, because I don't necessarily make that like a pillar of the process. It does come up with clients, and we'll work it in there. Probably when we get to the meal timing conversation, we'll start talking about healthy fats. But for the biggest bang for our buck, as we're being additive about nutrition, we start with, like, are you consistently eating enough? Are you getting a protein? Where are you getting it from? Every time you eat, veggies every time you eat, and then when are you eating? And fats tend to fill in the gaps along the way. All the while I am doing this with my clients, we are breaking down the psychological skills that support change, that help that client to connect more deeply and more honestly with their true self and shift the focus away from eating less to change their body towards eating well to nourish their well-being, which is, to me, the most important aspect of any part of our work. Is how do we build a lifestyle that builds lasting well-being, a foundation where people can flourish from? Because that's what I'm on about. And you probably knew that, being a fan of this show. Whew. Okay, so just to summarize those 4 steps. Are you consistently eating enough? Are you getting enough protein? Where are you getting your veggies from? And then are you consistently eating throughout the day, every day, in a way that supports your well-being? That is additive nutrition in the way that I use it with my clients. I would love to hear your feedback on any of that, including if you want to debate intermittent fasting with me. Let's go. So you could find me online in a variety of places. I'm on LinkedIn, easy to find there. Instagram, I'm darlene.coach. You could email me, info@darlene.coach. Or you could check out the Substack that we've got for the show. It's coachdar.substack.com. There you're going to find articles. Oftentimes they relate to the show's episodes and they have step-by-step. So there's already one for additive nutrition if you want a visual summary of everything that I've talked about in this episode. If you're a fan of the show, I hope that you've already subscribed. Thank you to everyone who's been writing reviews. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, I hope that you like, that you share, that you subscribe. Tag me when you share. I would love to see that. I hope that you are all well. Thank you to Eric, our producer, and out there in the world this week, be well and take good care of yourselves.